Let's go back in time. We're in 1978 and July, August. The cover of this is really kind of meaningful to me. Actually, I've just attended a lady bass fishing tournament meeting here yesterday, and it brings back a lot of great memories. This one really was celebrating, it was a regular circuit, but it was celebrating Pam Martin Wells, who recently died, fought a long battle with cancer, and I've always had a tremendous amount of admiration for the women anglers. I fished with some of the best on the planet. Chris Houston, Jimmy Houston's wife. Fished with Penny Berryman, and I admired all their courage. Some of them had support, some of them did it on their own. But the one thing, and I've always wondered about, is why the women anglers, because they've attempted to, and Pam Martin Wells actually fished the Classic in 2010. She was the second woman to fish the Classic. The women's circuit back in, whoever was Angler of the Year was invited to Classic. And she did quite well. She caught a limit every day. But still, in regular events, and they still today, the circuits I fish, the Opens and Toyota Series, they do fish those, and but again, I'm an analysis paralysis person. I observe them and I see how good they are. And the one thing that they excel over men pretty much completely, in my opinion, now after fishing after both, not all men, but most men, is their positive versus negative attitude. I never drew a woman, never fished around a woman or with a woman that had negatives, a dominant negative attitude. They were very positive. Where with men, I fished with them now for 50 years, and I see when they're young, like you see these young anglers out there now, they have more, it's not that they have more reasons to win, they have less reasons to fail. And time, unfortunately, as we get older, we tend to attach more reasons to fail to our next day's fishing than reasons to win. And it's powerful. I've studied it, I understand it to a degree, and and you've heard it your whole life in other sports from your family, hey, get your attitude right, et cetera, and we've heard it so much that we don't like to hear it. But the one thing about the women was that they have an incredible, so what was it? And I come up with my own theories, and that's all they are, is that women are not willing, and I'm talking about the ones that love to fish, to make fishing priority one. Their families are always priority one. And sadly, men will make that the most important thing in their life, whether they will admit it or not, and everything else is priority too. And it's only time goes by that you realize, especially when you've had a great support of, which I have, of my family forever. And then all of a sudden you realize when your young daughter points out to you on TV and she's sitting in your lap and she calls you Dad, and she's pointing at the TV and says, Dad, look, there's Rick Clunn. That's when you realize that you may be a damn good angler, Rick Clunn, but she's not sitting in Rick Clunn's lap. She's sitting in Dad's lap. Is Dad as good as what he does as Rick Clunn is at what he does? But we don't realize that as men as quickly as women do, I think. And so that's kind of what I observe, and what I still admire Pam Martin Wells. She did it both ways. She was dominant, but she had a family. So I admire that. I wish I could go back in time and have her teach me, how to do that. Because each individual only has so much energy to give to different things, different people, different things in their life. And men are too willing to give it all to something to be a success, to be, and in their defense, that's the way we were raised. We were raised as the quote, hunter, the warrior. We have to provide for the family and the tribe. So where a woman tends to be able to do both. She can do it all. I would love to go into this article about with you, but I have a little bit too much inside information on it, and so I'm going to stay out of it. If you would like to read, this was about wanting to go to what everybody thought at that time, to a lake in Cuba to catch a world record bass. And it became a battle between people in this country who was going to get that, you know, that Cuba was going to give, you know, a group like a big guide group like they did in Mexico. Give us this person and he'll book you in Mexico and set you up with these incredible resorts and food and have boats for you there and come try to catch 100 bass a day, or in the case of Cuba, the world record. And Cuba finally gave it to a person to do that, but there's a lot of people in this country that became bitter because they got it and he didn't. And so they went to politics and got it you know, stopped. They stopped it because they said it was being unpatriotic. The fishermen, they just went to go catch a big bass. All right. This again is, you know, about solar lunar tables, and I think it was probably written by Doug Hannon, because Doug, yeah, and Doug was a great believer in solar lunar tables, but at the same time, he like me, he knew it was a variable, but it wasn't the only variable. The solar lunar tables could tell you 9 in the morning is going to be the best time to be on the areas that are good, and that was the key to solar lunar tables. If it was stable conditions, if you've got some good areas, be there during those time frames. But it's not the only variable. And if it's 9 in the morning and yet it rained all night and that area is flooded out now, that variable overpowered the solar lunar tables. So just, yeah, study them. I wish I'd studied them more. The main thing I learned from them is if it's stable conditions, or even if it's not stable, go in and look at your best areas. You know, don't be somewhere looking for fish when you know where fish are, and that could be a prime time to be there. And here's one again, they're still trying to defend the stripers. I don't believe this one either. Stripers and largemouth bass are good neighbors. No, they're not. Striper and smallmouth are not good neighbors. They do get along a little better, and they're less likely to eat each other, but bass will eat small stripers, and big stripers will eat small bass. So I've seen people that got enough of them and can tell you that. Again, this is a lot of, you know, in the early days, women were trying, a lot of the good anglers were trying to get into the bigger men's tournaments and fish those same tournaments. And a lot of tournament rules in the early days prevented it. And then Bass made the effort one year and said, yes, you're allowed to play your entry fee in our opens and enter them. Oh, and then of course, jealousy within wives said, no, my husband's not getting in the boat with a lady that has to take her pants down and pee during the middle of the day. Okay, I mean, but that was the main reason. You know, I may have told you this already in an earlier issue, but Ray, Scott, and them knew I was fairly liberal-minded. So when we went to Okeechobee to practice, a Miami paper wanted to send a female rider there and asked if she could fish with me. And her only reason to fish with me was to figure out how many different ways there was for a woman to drop her pants and pee in a boat. And I mean, I said, fine, I don't care. I've guided 80-year-old women that had to pee. And all they would do is say, hey, Sonny, face forward, sing a tune or something, we got to pee. And you know, you hear them zipping and doing all that, and so that was fine. So I said, yeah, bring her. She had first thing she asked me was, can I pee in your live well? And I go, no. That's the only place you can't pee. I said, you can't pee in my live well. And she pointed to different places, you know, the splash well and everything else. Yep, that's good. And, you know, and she brought funnels with little tubes on them. And she brought ponchos that you put over herself with little buckets. And then she's tried different, she says, you know, and she said, well, can you just hang it over the side? And I said, yeah. I said, my advice is that I'll point to the best places to do that, because I've had women do it. You don't want to pull your pants down and fall in the lake backwards, so you get to do it by the steering wheel, or you can hold the steering wheel, etc. So anyway, that became a silly issue, and Bass actually revoked women now after 2 years of being able to enter the Opens and enter the BASS tournaments. Then the Corps of Engineers come in and got involved and made them reverse it back. They said, you can't make a rule that women can't fish in your tournaments. If you do, you're not allowed to fish any Corps of Engineer lakes. And so that kind of turned that around for a while. It's again humans and our craziness. Because here's one of the best I ever fished with is Chris Houston. And Jimmy was a big supporter of hers, and vice versa. Bass and Gals was an incredible event for a while, and Chris, like me and Kevin Van Dam, won the Women's Classic 4 times, the only person ever did that.
I didn't know that.
One in the women's side of the deal. It says, what does it? I'm going to read what she said, because actually, it says, on the water, Clunn had reminded me of a fisherman we all admire, a long-legged shorebird, that kind that stands on one foot a lot. And Chris did that. She's got her foot there, and Jimmy did that. And but there was a circuit, women's circuit called Bass and Gals, which Sugar Ferris started, that they fished for probably 20 years, just like that. And it took, most women went to it and over going to a bass tournament. But there's, even the Opens I'm fishing now, there's a few young ladies that are dedicated to go out there and try to prove that they can do it just as good as the men can. And there's no reason they can't, you know, that I know of. How to fish with your spouse and stay married. Another one of the women's issues here. Imagine. I'm just laughing at the picture of Marianne Martin. She was a huge advocate, but she had a bad habit of having her mouth distorted in strange ways when she was on camera. And I was guilty of that myself, so. Here's our next tournament, Lake Gaston in Virginia. And I ended up 30th in it. Again, I'm trying to re-qualify for the Classic, even though I'd won the Classic in '77, which back then automatically made you eligible for it in '78. I never used that automatic requalification. I always requalified, and that's just one of my goals. Well, that's July, August 1978.